Good morning. How are we doing today? This is James Sweeney, AK SplitSuit. Welcome back to another video. And in today's video, I want to review the questions and answers for the Ace King All-in Preflop mini quiz. Now, it's considered a mini quiz because there's under 10 questions, so it's nice and quick, nice and easy. And if you haven't already taken the quiz, please pause this first, take the quiz, check the link in the description box down below, and then jump into the rest of this video so that way you've actually taken the questions and you can see if your answers were correct. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting with question 1, this is a pretty easy one. So how much equity does Ace King offsuit have against tens? Again, just talking about it from kind of an all-in preflop standpoint. So we noticed that about half the people, 47%, said 43%, about half, 47% as well, also said that Ace King had 48% equity against tens, and then some small subset of people thought that Ace King was actually ahead in the situation, or possibly misread the question. I'll give the benefit of the doubt there and assume that not quite that many people assume that Ace King has an equity edge. But if we proof it real quick, and this is just stuff that we want to know, so Ace King offsuit against tens, evaluate it, good to go. Notice that Ace King off has 43% equity. And this is Equilab. If you don't already know how to use it, I have a video showing how, and I'll leave a link for that in the description box too, in case you're curious about how to use this piece of software. But in general, this is pretty much what you're looking at. Now, some people may get here and say, well, what about like Ace King suited? Okay, fine, totally fair, let's check that. So Ace King suited jumps up to 46% equity, but notice still that we're not at that 48. Just in general, the double Broadway hand is always going to be behind to the pocket pair. There are times, rare times with information where that could change. For instance, let's say both tens were dead in the deck. So just take two different tens, that one and that one, evaluate it. And now all of a sudden you notice that the overcards can take the equity edge, but that's only with extraneous information. And one more thing just to proof it, again, just trying to make this as well-rounded as possible. Notice that if we have a different pocket pair, one that doesn't necessarily conflict with the straight potential, right? With Ace King, we could use a 10 for making Broadway, and there's a little bit of an equity bump, but still not a crazy one. So remember that when you're dealing with the pocket pair that's in the conflict zone, so in the situation 10s conflicts with Ace King making Broadway, that's going to change the equity ever so slightly, but again, it's always going to be behind without other information. So that is Ace King against tens. Nice and simple. Hopefully you got that one right. Alright, scrolling down to question 2, we have a slightly different question. So this is a little bit tougher. How much equity does Ace King suited have against a range? And this time the range is going to be Queens plus Ace King. And again, when we're talking about Ace King all in preflop, and that's really what this quiz is trying to test you on and trying to help you with, you have to know these kind of equity breakdowns. And if you don't know them, it's going to make even just basic Ace King play preflop more difficult. So it may seem a little cumbersome, a little technical, a little too nerdy, and I totally get if that's the case for you, but I assure you, having these equity breakdowns understood is going to be super helpful in the long run. So we notice that in this situation, 46% of people said that Ace King suited was going to have 42% equity, another 42% of people said 36, and so on and so on. And again, some people even thought that Ace King would be ahead in this scenario. I mean, even just looking at it, you know that that can't possibly be true, right? Because Ace King is going to chop against Ace King, it's behind the coin flip against queens, and it's crushed by kings and aces. So, of course, Ace King suited is not going to be ahead here in the equity sense. So let's just proof it real quick. So we have Ace of Spades, King of Spades. We're running against a range of, sorry about that, Queens plus Ace King, and of course the Ace King is going to be blocked out because we do have Ace King ourselves, and of course that brings us to 42% equity. So the average person was correct here, but we noticed that still a large chunk, more than half the people that filled this quiz out did not really know, and this is just one of those bare bones basic ones that you have to have memorized. And here's the honest truth with you. Yes, memorizing some of these equity breakdowns is a little time consuming and it's going to take up, at least some mental brain space. But by the same token, it's something that you want to have. And I'm going to be totally honest with you. If I get lazy and say I'm not doing a tremendous amount of study right that moment, or I take a month off and I'm being a little bit lazier in terms of doing these kind of equity calculations every so often to refresh my brain, I will forget them. Now, it's not that I want to forget them cold turkey and be like, oh, I don't know, Ace King has 85% equity, or no, it's not that bad. But it's going to slip a little bit and I'm just going to be stuck with a ballpark idea. So especially if you're going to like go play a rack of tournaments or you're going to start taking a month really seriously, just make sure to refresh yourself real quick. It's like riding a bike with these things. Your brain will remember them once you re-practice them, but I assure you if you spend the time and practice with it, it is going to be very, very helpful. And it's really going to help you take a more mathematical and technical approach when it comes to choosing better lines because you're going to have better information doing so. Okay, this next situation, we're going to actually do something a little bit different and actually break down a hand. So this is a hand where we're at 1-2. We have $200 starting stack, so 100 big blinds. A tag opens to $10 from middle position, folds 2 on the button, and of course in 2-5, opening a 5x is very, very standard. So don't feel like this is totally weird. If you're an online player, of course, these sizes will differ slightly. So tag opens to 10 from MP, folds 2 on the button with ace king suited, you 3-bet to 35. Everyone folds to that same tag, who then re-raises to $80 total. So if we assume that his 4-bet range is only queens plus ace king and that he will never ever fold if you shove, is a shove plus EV here. So you may be looking at this and saying, I don't have any idea how the heck I would solve this. Okay, well, let's break it down real quick and take care of it. So there's two major things that we can use for solving this. And again, this is all stuff that we do off table so that in real time we can look at a situation like this and be like, oh yeah, I pretty much know what I'm doing here. So oddly enough, the setup is pretty much the exact same. We have ace king suited against queens plus ace king, so we still have that 42% equity. Good to know. Now this is my going all in preflop spreadsheet. This is very, very helpful and it is available for free if you want to download it and you use Excel. I think you might be able to use it in like Google Docs or Google Sheets, whatever the heck it's called. So you can always download it. I'll leave a link for that in the description box as well. In this situation, what do we have? So we just simply enter a couple pieces of information. So the pot size before we shove is going to be 118, right? His $80 4-bet plus our $35 3-bet, and the blinds in there as well. So 118. How much do we have to call right this moment? Well, 45. We have 35 in there. He went to 80 total, so 45 more to match that. Effective stack, how much are we really shoving for? 165, because we already put 35 in there. And our equity against his all-in range is 42, right? Because we just calculated that in Equilab. 42% equity is what we have here. And then right down here, this is kind of like the major important part. So how wide is his original range, and then how wide is his stack off range? So in this situation, we're assuming both of those numbers are the exact same. You could write, 55 and 55 here. It really wouldn't matter. All that matters is that there's no gap, so there's no folding going on from villain. And we actually notice in this situation that it is plus EV to the tune of $4, so 2 big blinds. So not the most profitable thing in the entire world, but we notice that it is slightly profitable. And down here, you may be looking at this being like, what the heck is going on here? Well, this I made just to make life a little bit easier to analyze similar scenarios automatically. So this looks at, okay, if your equity was increased by 5%, what would it look like? If you got 5% of folds, what would that look like? Or 5% of extra folds, and then so on, all the way up to 10 on both the fold and the equity to negative 10 on both the fold and the equity. So you notice that, in general, looking at kind of like these close clusters, it's, pretty break even, slightly profitable, but that's still something that you really want to know because, again, this quiz is all about ace king all in preflop. So we noticed the average person, almost 2/3 of people that took this, thought that this was actually not plus EV. So this is actually something that you really want to have hammered out, and even more so if you're a tournament player, right, where you're going to be getting ace king all in preflop more often. It's really important for you to be able to identify situations where getting ace king all in pre is definitely going to be the most profitable line versus definitely not going to be the most profitable line. So in this scenario, actually the average person was very, very wrong. We mathematically proved that, and we can go forward from there. Now again, this doesn't say that you have to shove here. That doesn't say that flatting couldn't be more profitable. I'm just proving the math given the exact question that was given. Okay, this next situation, we have a slightly different spot. This time we are playing 2-5, and we have $600 effective stacks. So you open from the hijack to 20 with ace king offsuit. The button is a lag, who 3-bets to 70, and it folds to you. What's your play? So in this situation, a couple different options. One is 4-bet and call the shove. Another is just call. Another is 4-bet and fold if he shoves. And then the final option is just to fold to the 3-bet. So you notice 4% of people said that they would just fold to the 3-bet. No, you cannot do that. Against a lag is definitely going to be 3-betting with not just the ultra nuts, and as such, you definitely cannot be folding ace king here. If you're folding ace king against someone who 3-bets really, really liberally, then you of course are folding too often, and you're actually inviting them to continue just absolutely re-raising your preflop and making your life an absolute hell. So please don't do that. So really the options are between 1, 2, and 3, 4-bet call, 4-bet fold, or just call the 3-bet. So I always like to start by proofing this kind of stuff mathematically and then going from there. And again, in real time, you're not going to be able to do this. This is all stuff you do off table so that it becomes kind of ingrained. And in real time, you can kind of estimate these things better and say, okay, this is a good spot to do X, Y, or Z, or not so much. And also keep in mind, like, we open from the hijack, so kind of a stealish position. They are 3-betting from the button, so definitely something that I think they're going to be doing with not just the ultra nuts. And we'll go forward. So we can use both things again. Notice this time we have ace king offsuit, so we'll just work with that. And we will start from here. So the math, the reason why I like to start with the spreadsheet is because this is actually supposed to be used for situations where you 4-bet preflop with a commitment mindset. So situations exactly like this. You know, if we 4-bet, we don't have to 4-bet shove for 600 over a $70 3-bet. But if we were to 3-bet to, 4-bet in this situation to something like 170 and they shove, and we're definitely going to be calling that shove if that's the line that we choose, then we can run the math with 4-betting with a commitment mindset. So essentially the entire 600 is at risk when we are doing this kind of calculation. And that's kind of what I would work with here. So in this situation, the pot size before we decide to do that, well, there's 70 plus our 20 plus the blinds. Let's just round it up to a flat 100. Nice and easy. Perfect. How much do we have to call? Well, again, $50 to just call the difference between those two. Excellent. And effective stack size left, how much is it? So we already have 600 to start. We put in 20 to go, so 580 left. Perfect. And our equity against their all-in range. So there's two major things that we need left. One is the equity, and then two is the the fold equity part of the whole equation. So let's start with the equity against the all-in range. So if we were to get it all in preflop here, right? We open hijack, they 3-bet button, we 4-bet. What range are they going to get it in with us? Well, I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that it's going to be like 10s plus ace king and then probably ace queen suited to some extent. Now, of course, you may look at this and say, well, I massively disagree with that. I don't think that this person is ever going to stack 10s. I think they're just going to do something else with it, or you don't think that they would 3-bet with some of these hands, whatever it is. Fine, this is the assumption that I'm going to make, and I'm going to run the math off of it. The beautiful thing is, even if you disagree with any of these range assumptions, you can go back in here, plug in your range assumption, get the equity difference, and then plug it back into the formula. Nice and easy. So this is the range that I'm going to assign for the time being. And again, part of this is because my image is most likely going to be pretty wet and aggressive, and as such, I think they're definitely not going to be like 4-bet folding 10s against me. So I think this is what we're dealing with. So equity is 43%. Perfect. Excellent. So then the last little bit here is this. So essentially, how wide do we think he's 3-betting, and then what is his stack off range? Well, we know his stack off range is roughly about 4. I was going to say 3.5, but it's actually 4. So we're going to do a 4. So we get that from right here. So that's how much is stacking. Perfect. And then how wide is he going to 3-bet? So let's say that, again, I don't think that he's just going to 3-bet with the range that he wants to get all in preflop with me. I think some chunk of the time the lag is going to 3-bet, ace 4 offsuit or 9-7 off or whatever hands that he just wants to like bluff with. So I think there definitely are going to be some hands that will 3-bet fold in this scenario. So I'm going to take this to be, start light and just go 8%, right? So we're getting some folds about half the time, and then the rest of the time we're getting it in with 43% equity. Notice in that scenario, we are still plus EV to the tune of $20. And if we look at this through the spreadsheet, looking at things that are similar, again, if we, reduce 5% fold equity or increase 5% on both the fold equity and the equity chunk, then all of a sudden we're doing better and better. So in this scenario, I'm definitely thinking that 4-betting is going to be profitable. And again, that's 4-betting with the commitment mindset, so definitely snapping off. And the thing you want to remember is that if this person is actually 3-betting wider, say they're 3-betting like 15% of the time in this scenario, notice that this EV just goes way, 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 way high, right? And that's just because we're picking up that uncontested pot preflop, a large chunk, and that, of course, is a great, great thing for us. So My general mindset is going to be to, like everyone else, or like the majority of people said, is to 4-bet and call if he shoves. I think it's definitely going to be profitable. I definitely don't want to be like folding ace king against their 3-bet, and I also don't want to 4-bet fold, right? Because when he does decide to shove, it's, going to be just fine given the fact that we're going to 4-bet to a number that's, going to give us a decent price on the way back. So I think 4-bet folding is really, really bad. I think cold folding against the 3-bet is awful. So the other options are really between 4-bet call if he shoves or call the 50 on the 3-bet. And the thing is that both of these answers, if I was going to be giving credit, I would give both of these equal weight. I think they're both correct. They both can certainly be correct. Now, one of these can certainly be better than the other, and the major thing that I'm focusing on in that scenario where I'm trying to figure out, okay, should I flat here or should I go for the 4-bet, is one, thinking about the dynamic and how the rest of the session is going to play out with this individual. Do I want to dissuade this person from constantly 3-betting my opens? Mind you, they have position on me a large chunk of the time. If that's the case, 4-betting now, putting my foot down and saying, no, you're not just going to sit here and 3-bet me the whole session, is definitely going to be a valuable thing. So that's thinking future dynamic. The other thing is you could say, okay, well, what if I 4-bet and he plays pretty darn close to perfect against that? Well, then I would say, okay, well, what is my edge if I just decide to flat here and play poker? Mind you, we're going to be out of position. We have a hand that's obviously pretty darn good, but it's going to be pretty tricky to play out of position. So you have to think about your edges in the 4-bet war and also just the flat, the 3-bet war, which one of those is going to be better, and then also what's the future dynamic regardless of the line you take. So I know that's a lot to consider, and it's even more important when you're talking about a good, competent, aggressive player who has your left. You definitely want to think about that future dynamic and don't just always fall into, well, I'm going to flat the 3-bet and thicken up the call part of my 3-bet range. Okay, well, what's that going to do for the rest of the session, and how good or bad is that for you? So, long tangent, and again, overall, definitely agreeing with the average people that did say to 4-bet call if he shoves, but again, really make sure that you're not just like playing super nitty. These 4% of people, I love you guys, but I want to see you guys not play so nitty in the future and get yourself into some bad spots. Again, we proved it mathematically. If you disagree with any of the assumptions, plug them into the spreadsheet yourself and see what the answer looks like. Alright, in this final example, we are playing 1-2 live again with 300 effective stacks this time, so 150 big blinds. You open from the cutoff to $10 with ace king offsuit, folds to the big blind who 3-bets to 35, you 4-bet to 80, and they shove. You have no history and no information on the big blind. What's your play? So 54% of people said that they would call in this scenario, 46% said that they would fold. Who's correct? Well, let's mathematically proof it and figure it out. So if we get a little nerdy here, and again get back to the math, we have in that same spreadsheet, actually the one that we just did for the shoving EV, there's also another tab or page, I don't really know what the heck they're called in Excel, but if you're down here, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. If you are down here, you can jump over to calling shoves, and then you can get this exact same kind of equation. But of course, it's much more simplified. There's only a couple numbers that we need here. One is pot size before calling, which is 380, right? His $300 shove plus our $80 4-bet, and technically it's 381 if we want to include the small blind, but 380 is fine. And how much do we have to call? Well, we already put in 80, so we only have 220 more to call in this scenario. And the last thing we need is our equity when we call. So this is where it starts to become a little bit more subjective, and which one are you assuming is correct? So again, we have ace king offsuit. Let's start with a couple different kinds of ranges. So let's assume that he's only going to shove the nuts, kings plus, and that's it. So in that scenario, we have 19, technically 18, fine. So if you think that this person is only shoving with the ultra nuts, of course, calling here is absolutely horrible. Now let's widen that out to a little bit more of a reasonable range, queens plus ace king. Evaluate that. Notice we get the huge equity bump. Now we're up to 39, perfect. And now you notice that we're profitable, which means that as we start adding more and more hands in here, of course, our equity is going to rise up slowly but surely, and the EV is, of course, going to be more and more profitable. So this is just a scenario where if you are assuming that the big blind is only shoving the ultra nuts, sure, you can fold. If you make the assumption that the big blind is is shoving with queens plus ace king or anything wider than that, then you have to call. Like, it's not even a question. So yeah, I would definitely agree with the average person who said call here. The people that said fold, again, I'm probably either saying one of two things. Either they're assigning ranges that are too nitty and kind of monsters under the bed, or they just simply don't know this math and they're folding too much because they're scared, they have ace king, they don't have the nuts, and thus they just don't want to get anything other than nuts all in preflop. So that veers back to either being 1, too nitty, or 2, scared without enough math basis, because if you have the math, then you're not scared about anything. So these are kind of questions and hands that are very, very important, and obviously in tournament play they're going to come up a lot in terms of getting ace king all in preflop, but even in cash games, like, you're going to have these scenarios where it's, okay, do I get ace king in here, yes or no? And a lot of the times when you're playing against really nitty opponents in live games, maybe they really do only get it in with kings plus preflop. Okay, and those are some scenarios where you can get away with making really nitty folds that exploit the fact that their shove ranges are too tight and too face up. But as soon as you're talking about playing against players who aren't that nitty, who aren't that face up, you start making some major mistakes by playing so nitty in your own game. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got all the right answers, or at least were in the ballpark on these. And if you didn't, that's okay. It just means you need a little bit of study. You need a little bit of practice. Probably mess with Equilab for a little bit. Mess with that spreadsheet for a little bit. And this stuff will start to become second nature with time. So again, thank you so much for hanging out today. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you did well on the quiz. And if you didn't, again, a little bit of work is going to go a long, long way here. If you're looking for your next step today, definitely go take some other quizzes. I have plenty on my site. Just go to SplitSuit.com, look for quizzes in the main navigation, and choose one that's going to be right up your alley for today. So I'll see you back soon with a brand new video. If you have any comments or questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, as always, good luck out there and happy grinding.